1503, Florence, Italy. Niccolò Machiavelli sits in exile, broken, forgotten, stripped of power. Every night he removes his mud-stained clothes, puts on the robes of ancient courts, and enters his study. There, alone, he converses with the dead, ancient kings, Roman emperors, the architects of empires, and they tell him their secrets. For 4 hours each night, Machiavelli records what they reveal, not what the history books tell, but what actually happened, the real mechanisms of power, the hidden laws that built and destroyed civilizations. The result? A manuscript so dangerous, so honest, so unforgiving, that for 5 centuries people have tried to bury it. They call it evil, immoral, a manual for tyrants. But here's what they won't tell you. Machiavelli wasn't writing for tyrants. He was writing for you. For anyone who refuses to be crushed by chaos. For those who understand that the world doesn't reward virtue, it rewards vision, strategy, the courage to see reality exactly as it is. Tonight we're going deep into the Prince, not the sanitized version they teach in schools. The real one, the brutal one, the one that reveals how power actually works, especially now in times of collapse. This is the Hidden Codex, where ancient wisdom meets modern power. Niccolò Machiavelli, born 1469, died 1527. Florentine diplomat, political theorist, playwright, historian. But to the world, he's known for one thing, being ruthless. Here's the truth, though. Machiavelli wasn't ruthless. He was realistic. He didn't invent cruelty. He simply described how leaders actually behave when no one's watching, when survival is on the line, when the comfortable illusions fall away. The Prince was written in 1513 during political chaos. The Medici family had just returned to power. Machiavelli, once a senior official, was tortured, exiled, left with nothing. In that darkness, he wrote the most honest political manual in history. No flowery language, no moral posturing, no pretending that good intentions matter. Just raw truth. And here's what most people miss. Machiavelli wasn't teaching how to be a dictator. He was teaching how to survive collapse, how to navigate a world where institutions fail, where trust disintegrates, where only the adaptable endure. Sound familiar? Look around, institutions crumbling, trust at historic lows, certainty dissolving. The world Machiavelli described is the world we're entering, and the lessons he taught are more relevant now than ever. Before we go deeper into what Machiavelli actually taught, and trust me, what's coming will challenge everything you think you know about power, morality, and survival. I need to ask you something. Are you the kind of person who wants comfortable lies or uncomfortable truths? If you're here for truths that most people refuse to see, if you're ready to understand how the world really works, not how we wish it worked, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications. Because here at the Hidden Codex, we don't deal in fairy tales. We reveal what's been hidden, what's been misunderstood, what actually works. This isn't for everyone. It's for those who refuse to live on the surface, those who dare to look beneath. If that's you, join us. Now, let's continue. Let's start with the most misunderstood line in The Prince. It is better to be feared than loved. Everyone knows this quote. Most people think it means be a monster. They're wrong. Here's the full context. Machiavelli wrote, "Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved." Notice the word safer. Not better, not more moral, safer. Because Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people refuse to accept. Love is conditional. People love you when you serve their interests, when you make them feel good, when you give them what they want. But the moment you can't, the moment you have to make hard decisions that hurt them, love evaporates, like morning fog. Fear, on the other hand, is consistent. Not fear based on cruelty, fear based on respect, on knowing there are consequences, on understanding that you cannot be manipulated. Machiavelli wasn't advocating tyranny. He was warning against weakness disguised as kindness. Because here's what happens when you lead through love alone. You become a hostage to approval. You make decisions to be liked, not to be effective. You avoid necessary actions because they might upset people. And eventually, someone who doesn't care about being loved will take everything from you. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are less careful of offending someone who makes himself loved than one who makes himself feared." Translation? People will betray kindness, but they'll think twice before crossing strength. Think about it in your own life. Who do you take more seriously? The boss who desperately wants to be your friend, or the one who's fair but firm? Who sets standards and enforces them? The second one, every time. Not because you fear punishment, but because you respect clarity, consistency, the knowledge that actions have consequences. That's what Machiavelli meant. So how does this work in practice? Let's say you're building something, a business, a project, a life. Most people operate from a place of seeking approval. They want everyone to like them. They avoid conflict. They compromise their vision to keep the peace. And what happens? They get walked over, their boundaries ignored, their time wasted, their dreams diluted. But if you understand Machiavelli's principle, you don't lead with aggression, you lead with clarity. You set standards, you enforce boundaries. You make it known that there are consequences for disrespect, not through threats, through consistency. And here's what happens. People respect you. They might not always like your decisions, but they trust you because you're predictable, reliable, strong. That's not cruelty. That's leadership. Machiavelli knew that in times of collapse, when everything is uncertain, people don't follow the nicest person. They follow the one who seems most capable of navigating chaos, the one they fear losing more than they fear following. But Machiavelli goes deeper, much deeper. He identified something that most political theorists ignore: the difference between how things should be and how things are. Machiavelli wrote in chapter 15, "Many have imagined republics and principalities that have never been seen or known to exist. But how we live is so far removed from how we ought to live that he who abandons what is done for what ought to be done learns his ruin rather than his preservation." Read that again. He's saying idealism kills, not because ideals are bad, but because clinging to them in a world that doesn't operate by those rules is suicide. Think about it. You're taught to be honest, fair, trusting, and those are beautiful values. But what happens when you're honest with someone who lies, fair with someone who cheats, trusting with someone who manipulates? You lose. Every single time. Machiavelli isn't saying abandon your values, he's saying understand the terrain. If you're in a world where others don't play by the rules, and you insist on playing by them anyway, you're not noble, you're naive. And naivety, in Machiavelli's view, is a form of arrogance, because it assumes the world will bend to your ideals, instead of recognizing that survival requires adaptation. Here's the brutal truth. Machiavelli observed that successful leaders throughout history shared one trait. They were willing to act immorally when morality would lead to destruction. He calls this virtue. Not virtue, virtue. It's different. Virtue means goodness. Virtue means effectiveness. The ability to do what the moment requires, even if it contradicts your principles, even if it makes you uncomfortable, even if people judge you. Machiavelli writes, "A prince must know how to act like a beast. He should learn from the fox and the lion. The lion cannot protect itself from traps. The fox cannot defend itself from wolves. One must be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." Think about what he's saying. Strength alone isn't enough. You need cunning. Cunning alone isn't enough. You need force. You need both. And you need to know when to use which. Most people are either too soft or too hard, too trusting or too paranoid, too passive or too aggressive. Machiavelli is teaching balance, not moral balance, tactical balance. Because in times of collapse, rigidity is death. The person who can only be gentle will be devoured. The person who can only be fierce will be outsmarted. But the person who can be both, who can shift between fox and lion, who can read the situation and adapt, that person survives. And not just survives, dominates. Now here's where it gets really dark. Machiavelli addresses something no one wants to talk about: cruelty. Specifically, when is cruelty justified? Most people would say never. Cruelty is always wrong. Machiavelli disagrees. He distinguishes between two types of cruelty: cruelty well used and cruelty badly used. In chapter 8 he writes, "Cruelties are well used when they are committed all at once, out of necessity for securing oneself, and then not persisted in, but instead turned to the benefit of the subjects." Translation: if you have to do something brutal, do it once, do it decisively, and then stop. Don't drag it out. Don't make people live in constant fear. Don't be cruel for cruelty's sake. But also, don't avoid necessary harshness because you want to be liked. He gives an example. Cesare Borgia, a Renaissance leader, took over a region consumed by chaos. Crime everywhere, violence in the streets, corruption at every level. The place was dying. So Borgia appointed a ruthless governor. This man cleaned up the region with an iron fist. Brutal, efficient, effective. Criminals were executed, corrupt officials removed, order restored. Once stability returned, Borgia had the governor executed in the public square. Why? So the people would blame the governor for the cruelty and credit Borgia for the peace. Cold, absolutely. Effective, undeniably. The region flourished. Machiavelli's point isn't that you should be like Borgia. His point is that leadership sometimes requires making choices that are emotionally difficult but strategically necessary. And if you're not willing to make those choices, someone else will. Someone who doesn't care about your moral hesitations. So how does this apply today? Let's say you're running a team, a company, a project. Someone on your team is toxic, undermining morale, creating conflict, dragging everyone down. Most leaders hesitate. They try to coach the person, give second chances, third chances, hope things improve. Meanwhile, the whole team suffers. Productivity drops, good people leave, culture deteriorates. All because one person, who everyone knows is the problem, isn't dealt with. Machiavelli would say, act decisively. Remove the person, not out of cruelty, out of responsibility to everyone else. Do it once, do it cleanly, communicate clearly why, and move forward. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it feels harsh. Yes, that person will be upset. But the alternative, prolonged dysfunction that poisons the entire environment, is far crueler to everyone involved. That's what Machiavelli means by well-used cruelty, not sadism. Strategic action for the greater stability. Swift, final, then restoration. But here's the part that will really disturb people. Machiavelli on morality. Specifically, his view that appearing moral is more important than being moral. Chapter 18, one of the most controversial chapters in the book. Machiavelli writes, "A prince should seem to be merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious, and it's important to appear to have these qualities. But you should have your mind so trained that when it's necessary not to practice these virtues, you can change to the opposite. In other words, look virtuous, but be willing to act otherwise when survival demands it." Most people read this and think hypocrisy. But Machiavelli isn't advocating dishonesty for its own sake. He's recognizing a brutal reality. People judge you by appearances, not by your inner intentions, not by your private struggles, by what they see. And if you're so committed to being genuinely good that you fail to appear competent, you'll lose influence. And someone worse will take your place. Think about it. You know someone who's deeply moral, genuinely kind, but terrible at presenting themselves, socially awkward, bad at optics. And you know someone else who's morally questionable, but charismatic, polished, great at managing perceptions. Who gets ahead? The second person. Every time. Machiavelli isn't saying that's good. He's saying that's reality. And if you want to have power, real power, power to actually change things, you can't ignore reality. You have to understand how perception works. Machiavelli writes, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. So if you're going to be good, you also need to be strategic about how that goodness is perceived. Otherwise, you'll be invisible. And invisible goodness changes nothing." Here's a modern example. Two people running for leadership. One has genuinely better ideas, more integrity, deeper knowledge, but can't communicate well. Looks uncertain, doesn't inspire confidence. The other, less qualified, but commanding presence. Great speaker, project strength. Who wins? The second one, not because people are stupid, but because they're assessing who can actually lead, and leadership requires the appearance of confidence. Machiavelli would say, if you have the substance, learn the presentation. Don't just be capable, look capable. Because in times of chaos, people need to believe in their leaders. And belief is built on perception. Now let's talk about fortune. Machiavelli personifies fortune as a woman, a wild, unpredictable force. In chapter 25, he writes, "Fortune is the ruler of half our actions, but she allows the other half to be governed by us." Meaning, you can't control everything. Chaos will come. Collapse will happen. Circumstances beyond your control will disrupt your plans. But you're not helpless. You can prepare, adapt, respond. Machiavelli compares fortune to a raging river. When it floods, it destroys everything. Trees uprooted, houses swept away, unstoppable. But when it's calm, that's when you build dams, channels, defenses. So when the flood comes, you're not swept away. Here's the application. Right now, we're living in a time of increasing instability, economic uncertainty, political polarization, social fragmentation, technological disruption. The old systems are breaking down. The flood is coming. Most people are doing nothing, hoping it won't reach them, trusting that things will somehow work out. Machiavelli would call that foolish. He'd say, use the calm to prepare. Build skills, develop resources, create networks, strengthen your position. So when chaos hits, and it will, you're not just surviving. You're positioned to thrive. Because while everyone else is panicking, you anticipated. You built your dams. That's what Machiavelli means by controlling the half fortune allows. You can't stop the river, but you can decide whether you drown or navigate. And here's the dark part. Machiavelli believed fortune favors the bold, not the reckless, the bold. Those willing to act when others hesitate. Those willing to seize opportunities when others freeze. He writes, fortune is a woman, and it's necessary, if you want to keep her down, to beat her and struggle with her. Before you react, understand what he means. He's saying fortune doesn't reward passivity. It rewards aggression, action, the willingness to engage with chaos rather than hide from it. Most people wait for perfect conditions, perfect clarity, perfect safety. Those conditions never come. Meanwhile, someone bolder acts and takes what could have been yours. Machiavelli isn't advocating recklessness. He's advocating controlled aggression, calculated risk, the understanding that inaction, in times of collapse, is the greatest risk of all. Because while you're waiting, the world is moving, and it's moving without you. Let me tell you something Machiavelli understood that most people never grasp: the nature of change. In chapter 6, he writes about how the hardest thing to do is introduce new order. Why? Because everyone who benefited from the old system will fight you. And everyone who might benefit from the new system, they'll be lukewarm in their support. Why? Because the old system is known, comfortable, even if it's failing. The new system, unknown, uncertain, even if it's better. People fear change more than they fear slow decline. So if you're trying to build something new, expect resistance. Not just from enemies, from people you thought were allies. Machiavelli writes, there is nothing more difficult to carry out, nor more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to handle, than to initiate a new order of things. But here's the key. He doesn't say don't do it. He says understand what you're up against, and plan accordingly. Most reformers fail because they assume good ideas will be welcomed. They won't. Good ideas threaten comfortable positions. So if you're going to change things, you need more than vision. You need strategy, allies, timing, force when necessary. And you need to be willing to endure the hatred of those who benefit from the status quo. Because they will hate you. Not because you're wrong, because you're disrupting their comfort. Machiavelli's advice? Move fast, build momentum, create facts on the ground before opposition can organize. And never assume people will support you just because your cause is just. Justice doesn't move people. Interest does. So align your vision with their interests, or be prepared to impose it. Now let's synthesize everything. Machiavelli spent years studying power, not in theory, in practice. He watched republics fall, princes rise and collapse, empires crumble, and he identified patterns. Laws that repeat, regardless of era, regardless of culture. Law 1, reality doesn't care about your ideals. Law 2, perception matters more than purity. Law 3, strength must be balanced with cunning. Law 4, cruelty, when necessary, should be swift and final. Law 5, fortune favors the prepared and the bold. Law 6, change will be resisted. Plan for it. Law 7, appear as you need to appear, not as you are. These aren't moral laws. They're tactical laws. And whether you like them or not, they operate every day. In business, in relationships, in politics, in life. The question isn't whether you agree with Machiavelli. The question is whether you're willing to see the world as it is, instead of how you wish it were. Because here's the final truth. Machiavelli wrote The Prince for one reason: to give you a choice. You can play by the rules you were taught. Be nice, be fair, be trusting. Hope the world rewards you for it. Or you can understand the rules that actually govern power and use them, not to become a tyrant, but to avoid being crushed by one. Machiavelli believed that good people lose, not because they're good, but because they refuse to learn the language of power. And in times of collapse, that refusal is fatal. He wasn't teaching you to abandon morality. He was teaching you to survive long enough to have the luxury of being moral. Because if you're destroyed, your values die with you. But if you endure, you can build something better, on your terms, with your vision. That's the real lesson of the prince. Not that power is evil, but that power is necessary. And if you refuse to understand it, someone else will. Someone who might not share your values. Someone who might not hesitate. Someone who studied Machiavelli while you were pretending the world runs on fairness. Machiavelli saw something most refuse to see. That the world operates on force and strategy, not justice and fairness. Not because that's how it should be, but because that's how it is. And once you see that, truly see it, everything changes. You stop expecting the world to be fair. You stop waiting for someone to save you. You stop hoping things will work out if you just keep being good. Instead, you act. Strategically, boldly, without apology. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. The question now is, are you ready for that clarity? Or will you look away? Most people look away. They prefer the comfortable lie that virtue always wins. But you're still here. So maybe you're different. Maybe you understand that we're entering an age where Machiavelli's lessons aren't just relevant. They're essential. If this opened your eyes to something hidden, something real, something you can actually use, hit that subscribe button, smash that like button. Let me know in the comments what resonated most. Because here at the Hidden Codex, we don't stop at the surface. We go deeper, into the shadows, into the silence, into the truths they tried to bury. Next time, we're exploring Carl Jung's most disturbing discovery, the one that made him question his own sanity, the one about the force inside every human psyche, waiting to take control. The shadow. You don't want to miss that. Until then, stay awake, stay sharp, and remember what Machiavelli knew. The world doesn't reward good intentions. It rewards those who understand how it actually works.